So in the interest of fairness, the speaking order has been randomized. So Mrs. Hummer, you are first. So when you are ready, please proceed. And you can see the timer on my screen.
Great. Thank Ashwin. Thank you all for inviting me here tonight. It's wonderful to see all the different groups in Bellevue. I actually grew up in Bellevue. My parents built their house before they had us 6 kids. So I've seriously grown up in Bellevue my entire life. I graduated from Bellevue High, Seattle U, received my master's degree at University of Puget Sound. And I grew up in our small family lumber business. We all worked there as kids. And then I chose that as my career after I graduated from Seattle U. Where my husband and I bought our house right next to Bellevue College. So I grew up in West Bellevue and now live in East Bellevue. So I've gotten to know both parts of Bellevue very well. And we raised our 4 kids here. In 2014, after being very active in our community, ever since we moved here in 1990, I was elected to the East Bellevue Community Council, and that was my introduction to city government. I've been involved with EBCC in the East Side here for over a decade, and before that, we were our neighborhood liaisons, so I was very familiar with the city in that regard, going to a lot of neighborhood leadership conferences and learning everybody from staff to council members, board members, as well as the neighborhood and business advocates. EBCC was sunsetted by the state legislature. So I turned my sights to city council, and I am running to make sure that Bellevue stays the very safe, welcoming, business-friendly place that I grew up in. My current campaign, I'm very actively doorbelling. I've knocked on over 7,000 doors and talked to over 4,000 residents in Bellevue in neighborhoods from Tam O'Shanter all the way down to Newport Hills. And everyone says the same things. They love living in Bellevue. They all support the police. They do not want to see Bellevue become Seattle. They are very concerned about crime in their neighborhoods.
And that's time.
That was it.
Yeah. Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, the Coalition, for the opportunity to share about myself, my work representing the many voices of neighbors and businesses on the Bellevue City Council, and our shared priorities for communities on the East Side and across our region. I immigrated from Hong Kong with my family to the United States when I was 10 and spent many years acclimating to life here, seeking out my own community in my new home, as well as adopting new traditions while holding on to my own. I went on to earn a master's in structural engineering and one in public administration from the University of Washington. And I now work as the chief engineer for the Port of Seattle, overseeing the port's $5.5 billion 5-year capital improvement plan, as well as workforce development programs, along with making sure that designs are safe for our community. And although I was busy with my career and raising our family and our 2 wonderful daughters, I was worried that our communities and neighborhoods were lacking a voice in the community. So along the way, I was involved with PEPS, the Program for Early Parent Support, PTA, Girl Scouts, Nourishing Networks, the Sophia Way Congregation for the Homeless, as well as serving on the Transportation Commission. And when I thought about Bellevue's motto that our diversity is our strength and we welcome the world, I wanted to make sure that we were embodying that. And during my 6 years on the city council, I've connected with so many of you in the community because I know and we know that we best deliver when in partnership, in collaboration together, that together we have and will continue to tackle challenges in the most effective, fiscally responsible, and results-oriented way. I've done that in Bellevue as well as the port, and I will continue to do that as a 30-year Bellevue resident who chose to start my family here. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you to the APAC leaders for organizing this forum. I'm John Stokes, and I've been serving on Bellevue City Council since 2012. and served as mayor in 2016-17. I've been a strong voice in representing our constituents and advocating for improved transportation, helping make the light rail coming to Bellevue a reality. I've also voted on a multitude of issues, from taking measures to address climate change, to affordable housing, to public safety, supporting our police department, fire department, all of which are important factors in our growing economy and for the business to thrive in Bellevue. I'm proud to have received the endorsement of Bellevue firefighters, all of our Congress members and state legislators that represent Bellevue, Mayor Lynn Robinson, County Executive Constantine, County Councilmember Balducci, as well as unions, healthcare workers, and many others. I'm very pleased to be here and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Mr. Dave Hamilton.
Great. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here, and thank you all for being here. I am running for Bellevue City Council because I want Bellevue to remain a place where people can sink their roots, thrive in their careers, start a business, and enjoy a great quality of life. And it's not just to give back to this wonderful community that's provided so much for me and my family, but while we grow and change, I want to fight for our shared values. And that means keeping Bellevue a place that is safe, welcoming, inclusive, and supportive for all who live, work, or visit here. I came from a working class family that was drawn to Bellevue about 50 years ago. We were looking for good schools and affordable housing. We found them. Ultimately, I sank my own roots here, started my first business here, raised 6 kids in Bellevue. 5 were born at Overlake Hospital. I acknowledge, though, today that my kids and too many young people can't afford to sink their own roots here. So when I'm on council, I'll work to make sure that we have the housing choices and great neighborhoods that we all deserve. And the business I started here in Bellevue grew because I knew I had to take my one-person logistics business that I started in my apartment and scale it to the needs of local employers. And over a 30-year career, I saw tremendous change in my industry, and my team and I kept adapting and changing to meet the needs of our customers, our employees, and the communities we serve. And this commitment to adaptation and change, skills that I've gained over decades of connecting people and connecting with people, these are skills I'll take to City Council to help other local entrepreneurs and workers thrive in our city, doing what I can to make Bellevue a great partner with them. I'm passionate about making the needed investments in our quality of life and the places we all need for recreation, relaxation, and a chance to connect to nature. And when I'm on council, I'll work with my colleagues and community members to ensure that we continue to prioritize park spaces and programs.
That's time.
All right, awesome, thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Mr. Mohammed Malakutian.
Thank you so much for having this event. My name is Mo Malakutian, and I am running for Bellevue City Council seat number 3. I have been living in East Side more than 15 years and Bellevue 10 years. 7 years of that, I've served as a Bellevue Planning Commission. When I moved here, I joined many nonprofits. I started with coaching Boys and Girls Club. Then I did some volunteering with Treehouse. And now for past 8 years, I have been involved with a nonprofit by the name of Wellspring Family Service. We try prevent and address family homelessness. I got my PhD at University of Washington in civil engineering, and also I got my MBA at University of Washington. I am an affiliate assistant professor at University of Washington, teaching future engineers, and I also work for Amazon in learning and development. In Amazon, we are trying to invest in our internal workforce and train them for a higher paid job, especially focusing on our warehouse worker. I have the skill and experience to be an effective member of City Council. My top priorities are affordable housing, keeping our community safe, and connecting our vulnerable communities to the services that they need. And finally, improving transportation and traffic management to fight the climate change that we have. I am committed to working with community like you to make Bellevue a more prosperous, sustainable, inclusive, and just city for all. And Ashwin, I give you 10 seconds back.
Thank you. All right, thank you. And for everyone who's joining in now, if you have any questions for the candidates, please message that to me privately so that we're not loading up the chat with questions. And we will make sure to get through those after 7 o'clock rapid fire. But for now, let's dive into the first topic of the day, which is growth and affordability.
Quick note first, Ashwin, I don't think I was able to send you a message. So in case for everyone here, if you're not able to send Ashwin a message, you should be able to send me a message so you can try that as well, just in case you're not able to reach Ashwin. As a quick note.
Okay. The subject that came up the most amongst our communities was about housing and affordability. The school district, the police department, and local businesses have all talked about how the high cost of living has made employee retention very difficult. The King County Council estimates that Bellevue will need 35,000 new homes in the next 20 years. And the passage of statewide bills like HB 1110 will already require Bellevue to upzone extensively as part of our comprehensive plan update. So the point of difference we've seen between some of the candidates is that several candidates had said we can meet that 35,000 goal under the proposed state guidelines in the existing growth corridors. Other candidates have supported additional upzoning near neighborhood centers and future transit stops. So the question for the candidates is, where would you look to locate future home construction in our updated comprehensive plan? And do you support additional upzoning in the future? So I think the first person to speak will be Councilmember Stokes, and we'll have 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Okay, very good. I appreciate that question. That's something I've been involved with for some time. Actually, I devised our Bellevue affordable housing strategy, and I'm very happy that the legislature took the action they did, because the reality is we do need more housing, and the plans we have in the future are constrained. And we, working with the community, it's going to be very important to balance things as we go along, where we want to continue to have the growth in our community, in our neighborhoods, and in particularly in growth areas where we have businesses as well. And we have the ability, we have the knowledge, we have the wherewithal to do it. What we need to have is will from all the community, and not kind of knock doing more housing, but support housing and being very positive about it. And we will work on that. And that's one of the big things I've been working on for some time, and really want to continue and see that we make progress. We can do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, well, we have been hearing that from our community for several years, that we don't have enough both housing as well as affordable housing. So I agree that we need to do more. And I believe that we need to look at both the growth corridors, like the Wilburton commercial area, the downtown, Eastgate, Bell Red look forward, as well as the shopping centers as well. That was one thing that I had advocated for us to study as part of the comp plan update, is to look at the ability to have housing on top with retail on the bottom in our shopping centers. I also support the C1, which is increasing density in our religious properties so that we can actually have more housing, like the Habitat for Humanity that's going to be at Holy Cross. And I think that in addition to that, it's also looking at transit-oriented communities where we actually have housing as well as services, at grocery stores, childcare. And then also, I believe that, and we've already passed some zoning that allows mother-in-law apartments in houses. They're also allowed to sell that part of the property so that they can build wealth in home ownership. And the next thing as part of our comp plan update that I also support is looking at backyard cottages so that we actually create more housing and we give homeowners more choices to be able to age in place and have more options for housing that is affordable for the community. And I think that with C1, although we've looked at the religious properties, we need to now look at the next pieces, which is other nonprofit and public-owned properties as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mrs. Hummer. You muted, ma'am.
the other two candidates summed up the forward progress and the policies that are in place and the state mandated items. You know, one thing about the state mandated HB 1110, I think the intent is good, but it really did take away and kind of set a precedent for jurisdictions and cities, and Bellevue in particular, which already has a strong planning background, took away our rights to plan our neighborhoods and our city the way we want to. I think the number one thing about housing is we need to build more of it. After 2008, there was a lot of housing builders went out of business, and to recreate the housing lag that presented needs to have more housing everywhere. And like the two previous candidates said, most of that is slated to go in our growth corridors, which sounds like a lot of apartments, but a lot of different kinds of housing. But mainly I look at the Wilburton rezone, and then we have Belred, Overlake, up to Crossroads. And all of these, you know, one thing about Crossroads is it's already very dense. We have the smallest properties, the smallest homes, the most dense properties already. And I think we really need to pay close attention to how this is enacted and pay attention to our comprehensive plan that is in place, because it emphasizes retaining the single family neighborhood character. So combining all that is going to be really tricky, especially going into this next year, making sure we get the robust input from people who need the housing, and then looking at the overlying factors. For instance, if somebody gets a pay raise at Fred Meyer, then maybe they don't qualify for their subsidized housing up in Crossroads, right? So then they would have to start looking for more housing. So it kind of exacerbates the problem. And I believe getting everybody together, and especially nonprofit or for-profit developers, because they can do things cheaper, faster, more economically, and they always have the customer in mind. You know, if it's not going to sell, they're not going to build it. So I think including everybody, and especially the small builders, because we're talking about small business, small lumber yards, everybody can profit from increased housing.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Mo Malakutian.
Of course, housing affordability is a top priority for me. If you go to my website, you will see the number one is that. And we don't need an input. We know that the median home price in Bellevue is exceeding 1.5 million. So we know that no one who provides services here can live here. We're talking about teachers, our first responders, nurses, coffee shop owner, small businesses. Is expensive. And as you mentioned, we are planning to create 35,000 more housing by 2044, and we should match the jobs here with the housing price, and that's not what we are doing. That's why we have 90% of the people who are working in Bellevue commuting to Bellevue because they cannot afford to live here. So we need to do a lot about that. As Council Member Zahn mentioned, and also Stowe, we have done a lot of good stuff. I am part of the Planning Commission, so I know we did multifamily tax exemption. We did increase density in religious property. We did micro housing. We did ADUs with home ownership component. We try to reduce parking requirements for affordable housing near transit, but we need to do more. And I think the community engagement and working with housing market developers, landlords, community group, nonprofits, and residents is a crucial thing to tackle this complex. But back to answering your questions, yes, I don't think across my neighborhood there is a 6,000 square foot house. I don't have any problem if there was 3,000 square foot house there, or 1,500 square house. We can keep the neighborhood character. We can be smart about that. We should increase the supply of housing and affordable housing at all income levels and different housing types. We need to work with developers, incentivizing them to provide affordable housing. We need to work on our permitting process for affordable housing to bring the cost down. And I think finally, we should preserve our existing building, and if we can turn them to affordable housing, it is cheaper, probably 30% cheaper to create a brand new affordable housing if we can preserve our existing one, is more environmentally friendly, and keep the community in place. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Perfect timing. And last, we have Mr. Dave Hamilton.
Great, thank you. Certainly agree with much of what's been said. Transit-oriented development, we certainly need to do it. Preserving the affordable housing that we have in place, absolutely. Much better way to preserve what we have. And this is really a great time to be having this conversation. As Councilmember Zahn mentioned, we all know the comprehensive plan update process is underway. So we've got some challenges ahead of us as it relates to housing, but we're up for it. And, you know, I would say we want to be bold and visionary, and we want to remain flexible as we go about building in all parts of our city. I think certainly focusing density in the growth corridors makes a lot of sense. So that we should do, but housing should occur everywhere. I don't think that, I understand it's a change, but I don't think we should be afraid of that change. I think this is a city that collaborates well. We don't draw bright lines between groups. So I think that housing suppliers and advocates and folks who need housing can work together and create some really good solutions. The city has an affordable housing strategy, which I think is great. We've got to know where we are. We've got to set some goals. We've got to know where we want to get to. That's really important. I think creating a variety of housing choices is really important. That could be anything from a micro apartment, family size apartments, middle housing, all those choices we need to bring online. I think too, making it easier to build, clearing the path so that housing suppliers understand what the standards are, and that they stick to the standards, but that we all understand it and bring that supply on sooner. I think the one thing I really want to see us do a little more of is act with a sense of urgency. We know where we want to build. We know what we want to build. We really need to get building because time is of the essence. And I would say too, that as we do decide all of that, thinking about walkable neighborhoods, bikeable neighborhoods, anytime we can give someone an option that they don't have to take a car to do what they want to do, I think we're really hitting all of the priorities that we need to.
Okay, thank you guys. So I'm sure we will revisit housing in the audience Q&A. So we'll leave that now for the audience to come up with questions. I think we'll move on to the next subject just so that we have a good conversation about it. And that is about public safety. Our communities have been rocked by the recent revelations about the tragic death of Janavi Kandula and the ensuing actions of the Seattle Police Department. Now, the state legislature passed Initiative 940 in 2018, and among other things, it requires independent investigations of incidents involving a law enforcement officer's use of deadly force. And so our question is, if a situation like that would happen in Bellevue, do you know if the city has a process for handing that investigation over to an independent body? What is your position on the existence of such independent bodies and their effectiveness in ensuring police accountability? And how do we make sure that our communities will have transparency and engagement with a process like that? So I think the first person to answer that will be Mr. Malakutian.
Of course, great question. So answering your first question, I am not sure what City of Bellevue has. That's a detail. I don't know if there is a dependent or independent body is going to be. But I have been involved in with our police chief and our police. They are all, to me, they are all very accountable, the police chief and the whole city of the Bellevue. This team's transparency and accountability is what they want. We have a great dashboard. We have a great website that talks about everything that they are doing and what they are doing. But in general, as a value and as a value of should everyone, including our police officer, should be accountable in what they are doing, and the transparency should be there. Absolutely, everyone should be accountable. And I think the more than that, we need to train our police officer and our law enforcement in a way that they be trained about all of the issues that happen. De-escalation training, diversity, sensitivity training is one of those issues that City of Bellevue Police is doing, and I think we should invest in that more. I think the transparent law enforcement practices is must, and I know that the City of Bellevue is doing a great job in that. I think the last thing I'm going to add is safety should be accessible to all, regardless of our background, regardless of our race, from where we are coming. I think we should all have access to safety, and I think our police should be trained for that.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. I mean, I think we should definitely consider an independent body to investigate an issue, a serious issue like deadly use of force. Certainly something to consider. I do applaud our department for its transparency. I think as Mo mentioned, the dashboards, there's a lot of data available for us citizens, anyone who's interested, to go look at and to see where the crime is occurring and how we're responding to it. I think too, you know, we have a good department. We have good leadership. We have dedicated, hardworking officers. I commend City Council for funding the CCAT program that puts social workers in the field with officers. I think, you know, not every call to 911 should result in a trip to jail or the emergency room. And I think when we have programs like CCAT that we can continue to learn from and build on, it helps us provide the right level of service at the time. The police advisory councils that connect the department with residents that provide critical feedback comes from their unique lived experiences in the city. I think that's really helpful. I think also too, we funded a transit unit. I think that's going to be really helpful. I think it's going to help people feel safe when they're riding transit. And we can't forget about transit workers. I mean, this is their workspace. So they're on buses and trains and in transit stations, and they need to be safe as well. So I think, you know, I think the way we've handled the department is really good. We have funded some additional positions. I think that's important. I think always providing officers with additional training, with advancement opportunities, and always looking for to fill the positions we have. So we need to ask, you know, what are we doing to attract and retain the best officers? That automatically ensures that we get just the top officers. I'm proud of the endorsement from the Police Officers Guild, firefighters. Certainly want to work to build that relationship and make sure that as we grow, that we meet the growing need.
Thank you. Next, we have Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, first of all, I have to say what happened to Javanavi was very tragic. Transparency is an essential part of our approach to public safety and assuring accountability in the city of Bellevue. Our motto is our diversity is our strength, and we need to embody that by continuing to strengthen trust between the community and our law enforcement. We did have an incident 3 or 4 years ago that was questionable, and it had to do with a white officer taking a black woman down, and we thoroughly investigated that. Bellevue looked at that and took action on it, and I think it got us to looking at it again to make it even better. So we have to take a holistic approach to public safety and make sure we have equipped and trained officers and firefighters. In fact, we recently approved the police budget, and we'll have 19 new officers with multiple staff members and CCAT program to join our police force, as well as a unit specifically for transit, as well as a group for you know, going out to where people in dire straits are kind of confused or whatever, and not just sending police out to go and arrest. So we're very aware of this, and Bellevue has been fortunate not to have too many of these incidents, but I guarantee you that the city and the police department as well have taken this seriously, and the community has taken this seriously. So, and when anything happens like this in another city, it just reminds us we have to be on really on our toes and make sure we don't have that situation. And our police and the firefighters do a lot to get out in the community and let people know that we're really all working together. We need to be very vigilant on that, but we're doing it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mrs. Hummer.
Thank you. Well, this is a great question, and I have the answer because I serve on the Police Advisory Council, and I've been there for about 3 years. I am involved in training. I get to observe their training. And one of my first interviews, I experienced our officers actually de-escalating my my role playing as a distraught citizen. And they are trained in not only in de-escalation, but every incident of use of force is investigated. And I learned that just in the training. The last training that I observed also was supposed shoplifter, and the shoplifter got irate, and the officer called in an extra officer, and that officer was getting irate, and the first officer is trained to de-escalate both the suspect and the other officer who got too involved. So we have ongoing training, and like you mentioned, that it is mandated by the state, but even before that, the city of Bellevue, through Chief Milet, had established the police advisory councils to improve the transparency between the department and the community. So we have intervened with interaction with the bystander. We already had a series of training set up, and now it's a standard curriculum that's available throughout the nation. It's more formalized training, and I got to witness that, and it's just remarkable what each officer is able to do. And I tell you, when you're doing that role playing, you really get into it. And then the feedback on all the training from the trainers and from each of the participants is invaluable. And even the observers are welcome to give some feedback. And they have other training. They have mental health training. They have particular issues. They have training on how to address people on the autism spectrum. And they have like 40 hours of training that is required. And then they have backup training that's also required. So it's all about de-escalating the situation and making it best for everybody involved.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you for the question. And I would say, similar to Councilmember Stokes, what happened in Seattle and those words that were said is completely unacceptable. You know, we hold our first responders to the highest accountability to have a respectful way that we engage with the community. And I believe that our Bellevue Police Department embodies those values. It is both safety and accountability. Having independent investigations is important. After the George Floyd incident that happened, the Bellevue Police Department went through a use of force review and made a number of changes as part of continuous improvement, because that matters. We've also added body worn cameras, so that we can make sure that from the standpoint of transparency and visibility of how they do their work, it's protection for both the police officers as well as the community. We appreciate the fact that they continue to spend time in the community. And as my other candidates have said, you know, they are trained in de-escalation, their own self-care. In fact, I attended their women's self-defense class that they offered to the community with my daughters, where they talk about that they are one of the few that teaches jujitsu to their police officers, so that they have alternative means to engage in those interactions with the community and during their investigations, so that they keep everyone safe, including themselves. We have, as others have said, a high bar for hiring. So although we have funded 19 new police officers, we go through a real high vetting process to make sure that happens, and super supportive of the Police Advisory Council because it is about being grounded in the community voices. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And if you have any follow-up questions as an audience member, you can send that to me in a private chat and we can ask that. We're going to move on to our last pre-submitted question before we go on to a rapid-fire audience round. And this is about small business support. So we heard from many immigrant business owners who struggled to recover from the pandemic, who weren't using the Bellevue Chamber of Commerce as a resource. And when the Chamber made relief grants available, local businesses often didn't know about them until community-based organizations like the Korean Women's Association or IACS or MAPS informed them and helped them apply. So the question is, how can Bellevue work to make community-based organizations and ethnic chambers of commerce more equitable partners? And what creative ideas do you have to support and connect with local businesses who haven't historically interacted with the chamber? So first person will be Councilmember Zahn.
Oh, yes. Oh, thank you. I love this question because we know that 97% of our businesses in Bellevue are small businesses. And in fact, last weekend, I was just at the North Bellevue Community Center where we had a Diwali fair where they were many micro businesses. So I think that this is a really important piece, both during COVID, where we actually had ARPA and CARES money that was going to small businesses. We started focusing in our human services funding on making sure that we were able to support the community-based organizations that were working directly with our small businesses. And I would say that the biggest thing I believe we can do is make sure that we're building the capacity for those community-based organizations, like an Eastside for All, like a MAPS, like IACS, CISC, because they are the closest to those small businesses that are hanging on by a thread. And they know the most about also culturally appropriate ways that we can outreach to the small business community. And they can help them with gaining access to capital, access to training, as well as access to opportunities. And I believe that actually it was, I pushed for the city to look at data and better understand who was actually getting contracts with the city. And they are actually increasing some staffing and working on supplier diversity, where in our $2.2 billion biannual budget, surely there's some funds in there for our small BIPOC businesses to be able to get access to that. And I would say that in addition to that, it is also making sure that we understand the most about what they need, instead of thinking that we know the most about what that specific issue is or concern or pain point that they have. We have an economic development plan, and we need to do a lot more to advocate and push for the Bellevue Downtown Association and the Bellevue Chamber to actually start a small business subcommittee. It's something that I've had some conversations with them about. And, you know, I think that with more advocacy and more voices, we can make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Mrs. Hummer.
Yes, I grew up in the small business. My grandpa established it in 1935. So I'm small business is in my blood, and small business is the blood of Bellevue. Even our larger businesses started out as small businesses. And over here on Lake Hills, we have a plethora of businesses. One of my first endorsements came from Best Walk and LaView Nails. And those are the businesses that our society rely on them for services and products, employment, not to mention the taxes. And my out of the box thinking, because I've been to a lot of chamber events, and when I go to a chamber event, I meet somebody that I've never met before, is for the chamber itself to have outreach to all of these small businesses, not just rely on the city. And the city economic development, one house I doorbelled up in Crossroads, she has a daycare, and she asked me for assistance. I said, oh, look, you can go over to the Crossroads, because they have the Crossroads mini city hall, and they have the economic developer there often on a regular basis, as well as other agencies, and you can connect with them. And then I showed her on the website. And what I find is the direct outreach is what makes all the difference. One of the first chamber events I went to, I sat with a fella who runs the Total Fitness up here, right next to Fred Meyer. And that was the first chamber meeting he'd ever been to. And I was virtually the only person that talked to him at that meeting. So I think individual outreach and an effort on the part of everybody at city council, at city hall, and not just put it on a couple different people, not have a special program for it. But I think we need to just go door to door. And we can make a plan about that, but getting the word out there has always been, ever since on the East Bellevue Community Council and when I first moved into my neighborhood, getting the word out is one of my passions. And that's why I'm on the advisory council. That's why the police support me. That's why I'm just a big proponent of the small business. And that's the biggest reason Best Walk supports me, is I went and helped them when they had a parking crisis and nobody else would respond. Everybody said, do this, do that, do the other thing. And I just actually went and did it for them.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the question. I think one of the things Councilmember Zahn said is just so important, and it really applies to anything that we're helping to solve or support. So when it comes to small businesses, we need to start by talking to them and finding out what kinds of supports they need. And I think too that's a long ongoing process. Someone the other day mentioned to me no drive-by engagement. So, you know, it's not the kind of issue that we can just show up one day, ask about, and make a decision. So I think that we need to engage more regularly with small businesses. I think the chamber, I've been pretty active there. I really like hearing about this because it's something I'd like to dig into. And I think that there'll be a good response there. And I look forward to helping build a bridge between the chamber and small businesses. I think it's something they would like as well. I started a small business, one person, in my apartment in Bellevue almost 35 years ago. One of the greatest things really about it was just being lucky enough to start in Bellevue. You know, I didn't get any direct help. I'm not sure if it was available. I would have liked it. I just felt very lucky that my customers were in Bellevue and that they were thriving. You know, we talk about Bellevue being a place you want to be. I think it's really helpful when it comes to starting and running a small business for that to be true. I do think there are some things that we do now that we should probably build on outside. That includes our working with neighboring communities with the Startup 425 program, which is like a one-stop resource for entrepreneurs. I think that that's helpful. I think too, you know, working with developers, working on new projects, and you know, we incentivize a lot of things, density and housing, just a list of things that we incentivize for new developments. I wonder about just incentivizing smaller spaces that are a little bit more flexible, that can accommodate small businesses. I think that's something that could really be helpful for small businesses as well. So I think there's a number of things we need to do and can do, and I look forward to working on it.
Okay, sounds good. Next, we have Mr. Malakutian.
Yeah, great questions. As Councilmember Zahn mentioned, Bellevue, the heart of the Bellevue's economy to me is our local businesses. And as she mentioned, I think we have 90% plus local businesses. And there are a lot of great resources available already. Like if you go to the economic development website in the city of Bellevue is a great webpage. And I think the problem is people and local businesses are not aware of some of the services. So I think that training and giving the access to those business owners all of the sudden is available, all of the information, all of the training that is available, I think is the key. Financial assistance, I think, is the key. Capital is by the interest rate and all of the inflation. Capital is very, very expensive. So financial assistance program for small businesses, especially diverse small businesses, I think is a critical thing. There are a lot of them available, and I would work to make these programs more accessible, more equitable, and effective. I think we have a good culture of collaboration and community, and I think Bellevue needs to even build on that to foster collaboration and networking among small businesses. That's the beauty of small businesses. There is no competition among them. Majority of them, they just wanted to add to value to the community that they are. I think on the city, we can be more business friendly, have more business friendly policies, maybe for a small business that they are starting their business, maybe some lowering their taxes or streamlining their permitting process. I think Bellevue is a great place for business, but we can also diversify our economy to be not just a tech sector, to diversify for create more opportunities for other businesses. Lastly, engaging the community. I engage with local businesses to see what exactly they want, what challenges they have to address those challenges if I get elected to the Bellevue City Council.
Okay, thank you. And lastly, we have Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, thank you. Small business is an area that we focused on more in recent years, and as one of our council members says, helps the mom and pop shops. Council, we hope to help them succeed, as well as the big businesses that we all appreciate and utilize. Especially during the pandemic, it was a priority for us to make sure we were providing resources and support to our small businesses. We have a strong business community in Bellevue, but we have to continue collaborating with more voices to have a fair representation of our community, especially our underrepresented communities that want to invest in Bellevue. And we also have to make sure they have the tools to succeed in Bellevue, because in the long term, it will encourage more business to choose Bellevue. Unfortunately, when you work with a population of 150,000 residents, it's not possible to go to every door and reach out. So putting in systems that, in addition, that work and is accessible to our community is very significant. The city budget is the guiding document on how the city spends its revenues for the good of the city and people. And every 2 years, we review that budget, work with the community on priorities and needs, and is passed by the council with significant public involvement. So that's where we need to work on, and including better, more support for small businesses and more diversity in businesses themselves. I think, and I really appreciate the comments that have been made by others. And I think in Bellevue, we have a pretty close, good idea of how to work together on this. And we have the capability, and we just need to get out there and really make it work. And I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that's the end of the pre-submitted questions. We'll now start asking questions submitted by the audience. So if you have those, please send those to me directly so that we're not flooding the chat. But we've received a lot of questions about affordable housing, and specifically what we're going to do about making housing affordable for people who are below 40% of the average median income. One question we received was, do you support mandatory inclusionary zoning, requiring a certain percentage of new construction to be affordable for low-income households? And if not, what investments would you be pursuing to finance the construction and operation of affordable housing? And let's say we'll spend rapid fire, so 1 minute each, just saying what investments you would make for affordable housing. So let's start with Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. So I think it's definitely something we need to look at. I think we are looking at it, having some requirements. Some of us were on a recent trip here to San Diego last week, where we looked at some of what they were doing there and get some of their and how they are adding housing, especially to their downtown zone. So I think incentives they are almost exclusively with incentives. They've added a lot of housing. I think it's something to look at. And then all housing types, so that people who are at the lower end of the economic spectrum, if you could have a micro apartment where you could get started and that you can work your way up, I think that's really helpful. So a wide range of options, and there's other ways we can cut costs for people. So, housing is expensive, but if you don't have transportation costs, if you can walk, if you can bike to other places, I think you can reduce your overall expenses. But we need more supply. That's really going to drive the housing price down, and we need it at lower price options.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Malakuchian, same question.
Yeah, so to answer directly the questions, I am not sure if mandatory forcing developer will actually create housing that is below 0 to 40%. It just doesn't pencil out. For those, I think till 60%, 60 to 80%, I think you can have great incentive policy or mandatory policy, whatever works, whatever has the best calibration that eventually pencil out. I think we can work with developers. Anything below 50%, there need to be another source of fund to actually those housing be developed. I'm an engineer, I know construction, I know development. It's no, so I think there is a combination of fund from state or fund from King County and working with nonprofit to be able to have those housings.
Okay, thank you. Next, it will be Mrs. Hummer.
Thank you. Housing affordability is something I hear at the doors in every neighborhood throughout Bellevue, and it's a tough one. When I talk to older people who have lived here there over 70 years, they tell me how much their house cost when they first bought it, like $25,000. Now it's worth over $1.5 million. And keep in mind, these are just 1,800 square foot houses on 8,000 square foot lots, one right next to the other. They were a planned development. And I asked them, I say, well, was it a struggle to buy? Because 25,000 sounds so little right now. And they say, yes. Invariably, they say, yes. When they bought in Bellevue, it was a struggle. When we bought our house, it would have been cheaper for us to buy in Renton than in Bellevue. And so it was a struggle. And so it can be a struggle. And there has to be a way to incentivize people to save and to keep working at the same jobs. And like I mentioned before, if we change the
Time.
Oh,
but you can finish your thought.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
If it all needs to work together. So we need to have the people who can afford the subsidized housing, that needs to work with the housing providers. And that's where we can take our $10 million that we get from our 1% tax, and we can apply that strictly to Bellevue and not farm it out to other other jurisdictions.
Okay, next we have Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. Now, I would say that I agree with Mr. Malakuchian about the fact that the mandatory inclusionary zoning is for 80% area median income. So in order to get down to 40%, it is going to require investments and subsidy and funding. So one of the things I push for is that the 1590 money, which raises about $10 to $11 million a year, bonding against future revenues, so that we can use that money to support developers and housing providers to be able to build even faster, because we know that we need to do that. We're also advocating at the state and federal level for more investments, because we know that for the amount of cost it takes to build, we can't do it alone just with Bellevue funds. And the National League of Cities, which I'm on the board of directors, affordable housing is actually one of our focus areas, while Mayor Woodard from Tacoma is the president this year. We have been doubling down on a housing accelerator program and learning from other cities about what we're doing, and also advocating at the federal level for the funding that can't just come from state or local. It
Okay,
is
thank you.
key.
Yeah. And last we have Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I really appreciate the comments that have been made already. I've worked through this process before, and I'm looking forward to the work this coming year. The affordability issues are a prime concern for the city and the council, and while we have plans and rules for that, we obviously need to do more to achieve success for all. The state legislature gave us new options that will address the growth and middle housing issues, and we need to have conversations with our neighborhoods downtown around the city to get more positive ways to accommodate our growth and achieve affordability. The real issue is the lower levels, and that is something we have to crack that. There are a lot of ideas out there and something we're going to really go forth, and it's a big challenge for us, and I'm looking forward to it, and I think we have the ability to make this work. We know what we need to do, and it's just us getting into it and having the communities to support us. We have the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to doing that and making it happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, a lot of housing questions coming. So first question we got, how do you plan to provide support for unhoused communities in Bellevue if, there isn't going to be enough affordable housing, other than sending them into already overfilled shelters or busing them to other cities? What solutions can we have in Bellevue to support the most vulnerable of us? So let's start with Councilmember Stokes.
Well, there are a number of things we can do. We've had a men's shelter. We've had housing for this very low level housing. We just opened a 240 unit and a permanent men's shelter, and we're doing more of that throughout the city. It's surprising when you go look at how many housing units we've done. And one of the first things I did is going out to and taking old buildings and things. We're doing a lot of things like this. There's a lot of opportunities to go forward. And transitional housing is something we're working on as well. I think that is the greatest challenge we have facing us. And I think we're working on a good path. It's just that we have to stay on that, and we have to commit a lot of funds. We have to commit a lot of time and a lot of energy. And Bellevue can do that. And I'm looking forward to seeing that we continue the work we've been worked in the past, that Councilmember Zahn and has really worked with us on that, and looking forward to it. Again, it's something we have to do.
Thank you. Next, we have Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. It is a huge challenge, and it's one that we need to work hard to remedy as best we can. I do think that the Eastgate facility, it's got emergency housing, it's got supportive housing, it's got workforce housing. I think that's a really good model. So I think more of that is going to be really important. I think working with our neighboring communities and looking at this in a little more holistically and kind of dividing up the challenge with them is really important. Looking to them as examples of how to help out unhoused folks. The Together Center in Redmond, I think, is really a good lesson for us, and we can learn quite a bit from that. And providing more housing, getting more housing into the pipeline. Homelessness is a housing problem, and if we can add some more volume, I think we can get, we can make some more success. But this is a huge issue, and it's one that's going to take the whole council and the whole community working hard on.
Okay, thank you. Next, Mr. Malkuchian.
Yeah, great question. My first response is we need to prevent that from happening. We need to prevent that people become homeless. The cost is cheaper. The rent on average per night in Washington is $30 to $40 per night on the Washington state overall. The cost of shelter is $150 per night. Prevention is the first thing. I think we need to have a great outreach program. I think this outreach program should provide food, shelter, and other basic necessities. Most importantly, a case manager and a case management service that can help people to develop and implement a plan to regain housing and employment, then training, education they need. And finally, the support that they need. If there is a mental health or substance abuse, the support should be there. These should be in our supportive housing, as Councilmember Stoke mentioned, or transition housing. Those should be available for them.
Okay, thank you. Next, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, I agree that how that homelessness is a housing problem, and it is both the prevention. So with rental assistance and building more affordable housing, that's one piece. I think that we need to also make sure that the shelters that we have the services that they need, that is going to help people exit into stable housing. We need to pay the workers that are working in those shelters that are one step away themselves from experiencing homelessness. We need to work with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority on a sub-regional plan so that we can work together on homelessness, and also recognizing that each person who's experiencing homelessness, there's lots of different causes of that. So making sure that we are have a lot of different services so that we're actually able to address each person's issues to address the issue. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, Mrs. Hummer.
I agree with everything that's been said here. I was an active participant in all the meetings that put together the Homeless Services Uses Land Use Code and the Permanent Supportive Housing. And it's not just, there's not just one solution. And I agree with Mr. Hamilton that we need to work regionally. We're not just in a vacuum by ourselves, and we made the agreement with Kirkland and Redmond to sponsor different groups of people. And I believe that we need to unite the services that we have going on in the city so everybody understands what's going on in Bellevue, and that we all adhere to a similar program so that the most vulnerable are protected, the providers are protected and held accountable, and they all have the same standards. So anybody going into any program can expect the same code of behavior from their other participants and the same consequences if they need to be. We need to really support our public safety. Our first responders are our police officers, and our most vulnerable are most reliant on them.
Okay, thank you. We have time for 2 more questions, so I'll try to combine them. We have a lot of questions about the school closures that Bellevue is facing, and specifically what we are doing to support human services for families and for children, because we are seeing a crisis that's slowly developing where this has become a city for wealthier single people, and families and working class folks can't afford to live here anymore. 89% of the people who work in Bellevue don't live in Bellevue. So what are you seeing as the human services gaps, and how can we make it more affordable for the working class? So the first person will be Mrs. Hummer.
Thank you. Well, I live here in Lake Hills, and our Lake Hills Elementary, 50% of the children qualify for federal free lunch. So that means that we have the greatest poverty here. We also have the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club after school programs at several of the King County Housing Authority stations at Spiritwood and Hidden Valley. And the council the city already supports those organizations, and we can support them even further. And my concern is that that affordable housing and people of the lower incomes find housing throughout the city of Bellevue. So we're not just all concentrated in one area. So that's one of my things. Then we also have 2 city employees that go out to Stevenson and Lake Hills Elementary to provide city services directly to the families.
Okay.
They are the family support, and
Thank
that
you.
could be expanded along with the YES program.
Yeah, next we have Councilmember Zahn. Same question. What gaps do you see in our human services, and how can we make it easier for families?
Well, we've seen huge gaps. In fact, COVID actually really revealed the fact that there are so many gaps. I was working with the community on food insecurity. We restarted nursing networks to connect those with resources to those that are in need. We know that our human services funding, twice as many applications came in as we were able to fund. Those community crisis centers or community connection centers in the schools. Some of them have closed, so families have to go farther away in order to get access to resources. So we need to double down on making sure we're making those investments in human services funding. We need to make it easier for the community-based organizations to get access to those funds. Although we have a shared application between cities for human services, I think the administrative burdens in those applications and funding is still too high. And if we really want to help, we need to get as many dollars into the hands of the community-based organizations that are closest to those in need without the undue burdens that they have to face to provide those resources. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, next, Councilmember Stokes.
Well, unfortunately, this issue also goes back to housing affordability to a great extent, and our school system is by enrollment. It's set up, and if we don't have enough enrollment, they don't receive the funds. So when people can't afford to live here in Bellevue, schools in our city as a whole will suffer the consequences. Community connection centers are one of the most important resources, but we have to make these funds and services more accessible for residents. I've worked for 20-something years with the Bellevue School Foundation for a long time, with one of the founders of Eastside Pathways, and this is a situation that's been going on for a long time, but the pandemic really made a dent in this. But essentially, we're losing ground because people can't afford to live here. More people don't come here at certain levels, and our schools are dropping in the numbers of kids, and that the funding is based on the number of kids, and so that's a real problem. And we are working in the city to do more. We work very closely with them, and this is something we really need to concentrate on because we don't keep our schools up and and that's something that attracts people for a long time to Bellevue. So it's a big, big issue, but thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Hamilton.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing we need to do is just acknowledge the reality of our situation. And, you know, we've got over 300 kids in the Bellevue School District that are homeless. So we have a real problem, and I think sometimes that's kind of hard to see. So I agree with some of the previous comments. I certainly think we need to look at our human services funding. I think we've got to say yes to more of those requests. I think housing, of course, it is a big deal. 27% of the households in Bellevue are cost burdened. That's a huge number, and I think it's only going to get worse. We've got good community partners, so supporting food assistance, senior support, all of those things, supporting children in enrichment programs. I think that really helps for us long term. And I don't see big gaps in the understanding of the issues. I think we have a good handle on it. We just need to do more. And I think we can do more. Look forward to doing that.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Malakouchian.
Yeah, I agree. Our human service funding should be increased. I think currently we just can address 50% of the requests that we receive, and that is unacceptable in the city of the Bellevue. I agree with affordable housing. The reason for the closure is not only families cannot live here anymore, but also we cannot even have teachers who lives here. So those both will add to those issues. I believe in equal access to education. I think every children in Bellevue should have access to high quality education. We need to have after school programs and vocational training to break the cycle of the poverty. I think the food is very important. I think it is really sad that in the city of Bellevue, we have food insecurity, and I think we need to address all of that with support of food banks, community gardens, and some other nutrition programs.
Okay, thank you. We can try to fit one more question in, but it'll be we can try and squish it in. So many questions. We really appreciate it from the audience. And keep in mind that we do have an in-person forum in 2 weeks about affordable housing, where you'll be able to ask all these questions in detail. So don't be upset if you didn't get them asked today. I think as a last question, we had an interesting conversation where when you speak about diversity in Bellevue, where diversity is our strength, Black and Latino people do not feel particularly welcome in the city. This is a city with extreme class inequality. There's Asian minorities that are very successful, white communities that are very successful. What ideas do you have to promote a sense of belonging within the community between classes and, you know, with minority populations that don't have that model minority tag? So let's start with Councilmember Stokes.
Well, that's a really deep question. I'm glad you asked it because we don't talk about that enough. We do have a lot of contacts. We work with different communities, and some are represented here tonight. And there are a lot of times when we do come together, but we are still going apart. And it's something we just have to own up to and work on this. And we if somebody has a solution to this that we haven't come up with yet, that would be great. We just have to get out there and actually, and we have a lot of events at the city hall, and we have great, but sometimes they are broken down by different groups. We haven't gotten over that yet, but we're way ahead of a lot of cities. It's outreach, and it's working with it and actually taking it to heart. We have a director who is in charge of this. We've put a lot of energy into it. And we need to have the community to come forward to us also. And I'd be glad to come with them and say, we can do better in this. We need to do better. And that's what it takes, is putting the pressure on. And we made a lot of strides, but we're set far behind.
Thank you. Next, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. This is a very important question because when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to talk about belonging and being a welcoming community. And so part of that is that I supported, along Councilmember Barksdale and I started the city having the first Communities of Color coordinating team, where we are focused on those whose voices are not being heard. We actually, as part of our funding for COVID relief, partnered with Centro Mexicano, who works with the Latino community. We also work really closely with Michelle Clark and several of the Black organizations that are working with our community, and Africans on the East Side. I see you, Adam. And so, you know, part of it is actually showing up in the community so that they know we're listening to them, we care. After George Floyd, the Sammamish High School had several Black Lives Matters rallies, and I showed up in solidarity to make sure that when it matters in the community, we're there for them.
Thank you. Okay, next, Mrs. Hummer.
I get back to my outreach. I'm the police officer, or the police advisory council for Latinos, and I'm of Swedish origin, not Latino. But in my neighborhood here in Lake Hills, 38% of the kids at Lake Hills Elementary are Hispanic ancestry. And I have proven to be a voice on the East Bellevue Community Council for the neighborhood. I've outreached to communities like Spiritwood and the Teen Center down at the Bellevue Boys and Girls Club. And for the hate bias meetings, we had one up at the youth theater, and I went to different stores with the flyer, again, door to door. I find that is just the most effective, and you can't just do it one time. You have to do it over and over again. And I'm glad to see Adam here, because she was at that event, and she noted that there were police officers, and there were advisory council members, and there were nonprofits, but there were 5 people from the community. And so the next one, we had a lot more people, but it was,
thank you.
It was
We're
all the
running out of time. I'm sorry. I have to cut you off. We need time for 1-minute closing statements. So I'll be abrupt with the time. Sorry. Next, we have Mr. Malkuchian. 1 minute.
Great question. And I think we need to celebrate all cultures, of course, including Latino. We are a diversity, but we are not involving and engaging this diverse population in our decision making. I think traditionally, the people are underrepresented, immigrants, diverse range of residents. I think they need to have a voice in our decision making and policy making. I think that's important. And one way to engage them that the City of Bellevue is doing some, we need to support events and festivals and celebrate their cultures. And this is something that is important. I'll give you one example. If we just translate the stuff to different language, we increase the engagement. Who will guess that? So I think just being intentional about it, I think is very important.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. And glad to follow Mo on this one. It is about engagement. I don't have the answers. I'm not totally sure. And the way that they're going to be gotten is by increasing engagement. And as I mentioned earlier, not drive-by engagement. This is long-term engagement out in the community, understanding the community. I've been involved in Leadership East Side, and our project team is working to build pipelines, diverse pipelines that get a wide range of folks involved in nonprofits, board and commission work, getting good voices at the table. And I think we always have to ask ourselves, who's not at the table? And we cannot make decisions in a void. It cannot be either about the loudest voices in the room. So this is long-term engagement. This is supporting people, making room, and encouraging people to be in positions of authority and help make these decisions long-term.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you to all the candidates who made the time for us tonight. We have time for some very brief closing statements, let's say 1 minute each. Just a brief statement on why APIC voters should vote for you. So let's start with Mr. Malakuchin, 1 minute.
Yeah, thank you so much. Again, thank you for this Zoom event. I think as our city grows, it is crucial to maintain Bellevue's exceptional quality of life, but for everyone. I think we are a welcoming place, but sometimes more to some people than the others. So I think we should have the lens of everyone should be treated the same. We have a lot of competing priorities that I think I can create fair and equitable policies that address that and benefit each and every of Bellevue resident. We don't have time, so I will really encourage you to go to my website, moforbellevue.com, and look at my endorsement, look at my policies. I have a detailed, not only the policies, but how I am going to get to those policies in my website. And I just reach out to me if you have any concerns or questions. Thank you for listening to us.
Thank you very much. Next, Mr. Hamilton.
Great, thank you. Certainly thank you to everyone for being here and getting engaged, and certainly the organizers as well. You know, on council, we don't get to choose the issues that come before us. I think we have to use a collaborative process to create common sense solutions to deal with the issues that we do have come before us. So I think we have areas that require special focus, like housing, transportation, climate resiliency, parks and open space, public safety. We need to give them the special attention they deserve, those particular issues. I hope that everyone will share your thoughts about what you heard tonight within your networks. It takes a lot of work and support to earn enough votes to win an election. It's a big job, but the real job starts in January. That's where the real work comes. And I just hope everyone will stay connected and provide thoughts and ideas as we get into the new year. Also, a website, it's Dave, or my email is dave@davehamilton.vote. My website is davehamilton.vote. Voters guides come out on the 17th of this month and ballots mail on the 18th. Please vote and encourage your friends and neighbors to do so.
Thank you very much. You stole my ending. Yes, next we have Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah.
Well, it's really been great to share the work that I've done on the council and what is yet to come. According to a recent survey, 73% of Bellevue residents believe that our city is headed in the right direction. And crime is down, according to the police chief, by about 10%, which is a good thing to do, especially after the pandemic. It's not just good luck by chance that this feels this way. It's the work we've done on the council and the collaboration we continue to have. With 2 open positions and new members on the council, I look forward to continuing positive, productive work we have going. Our diversity is our strength, but you know, we have a long way to go. The progress we made is heartening, and I'm looking forward to in these coming years to make this even better here in Bellevue and really address the serious issues we've been talking to tonight up front, and then we will really have a great city. And I'm really looking forward to it. It's John Stokes for Bellevue, or johnforbellevue.com, and looking forward to talking with you at any time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Hummer.
Thank you. I am excited to be running for Bellevue City Council. I've been involved in the city for 20 years, involved in city government for over 10 years. I have earned the endorsement of the Bellevue Police Officers Guild, our first responders, and those who are most trusted with helping the most vulnerable among us. I have also earned the endorsement of Deputy Mayor Jared Neuenhaus and Councilmember Conrad Lee. They know that I am nonpartisan, that I will always strive for consensus, that I am guided by facts and evidence, and I will not bring a polarizing partisan ideology to Bellevue City Council. I am also supported by the over 250 Bellevue residents who have contributed over $70,000 to my campaign, as well as Dennis Tam from Best Walk, and Jennifer from LaView Nails, and Lilybeth Jamora from the 7-Eleven, as well as Tim Lee, the East Side Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and Benjamin Lee, the Hong Kong Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you.
Please vote for me.
And last, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you for this forum. I believe representation matters. As Debbie Lacey says, co-creating the table together and belonging for the diverse community matters. I've been part of this community for many, many years. My proven track record as the voice of experience as an inclusive, pragmatic, and collaborative problem solver is what Bellevue needs to continue to advance the work that we have. I've been endorsed by 22 elected officials representing Bellevue from the federal, state, county, and city level, as well as 30 organizations that represent business, labor, and community-based organizations. That's where the advocacy and learning and policy will happen. That will help us be even better with public safety, housing, affordable homelessness, environment, human rights. And, you know, we all choose Bellevue to make as our home or our business. And what we need to have is to make sure that our voices are being heard and that opportunities are equitable for our communities. And I will continue to represent that on the Bellevue City Council. I'm the clear choice. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all the time we have, folks. Our deepest thanks once again to the candidates who made the time for us tonight. Audience members, if you have follow-up questions, which I can see you do, and if you'd like to ask the candidates this in person, the Eastside Housing Coalition is hosting an in-person affordable housing forum on October 19th at the North Bellevue Community Center from 6 to 8 p.m. So please bring those questions with you, and make sure to check all the candidates' websites to see their upcoming events. I'm sure they would love to discuss these questions with you. And a reminder to everyone that the deadline to register to vote this year is October 30th, and the mail-in ballots will go out on October 18th. So try and get registered before then. Thank you all very much for coming, and have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.